Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us today for the 10th annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Leah Lange from the IFWIS Library System, and I'm moderating the management track today. And assisting me is Shauna Kosecki from the Southwest Wisconsin Library System. We're really glad to have you here. Our presenter for this session is Felton Thomas Jr. with the Cleveland, Ohio Public Library. He will be discussing leading from the middle. Felton, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
All right, Leah, thank you so much. And Jonna, thank you as well. And welcome. I say good morning to everybody there in Wisconsin. Hopefully you can see a little bit of our snowy background here in Cleveland. I would assume it's fairly similar there in Wisconsin. And I hope, though, that you have, just as we do, a sunny day behind you. Today, I start with thank yous. Thank you for Leah. Thank you to Shauna for helping out today. I want to, of course, thank Jamie Matic and Jean Anderson for their work in helping put this together. And kudos to everybody who's a part of the 4W, as I'd like to call it, conference, and putting it together, and the 10 years that you've done it. It's not an easy thing to do to move something like this and be as successful as they have been and do it for 10 years. So congratulations on that. I also like to thank you. I say this all the time to my staff. The 2 years that we've been through the pandemic has been unlike anything that I've seen in my 40 years in libraries. And for you who get up every day, come to work hard to make our communities better, the communities in Wisconsin better, just kudos to you for your hard work and effort on that. And then today you have taken the extra effort to try to learn something even more. You want to learn how to be better and hopefully take something away from this conference that's going to help your communities be better. So with that, we're going to get started here, and I'm going to move on to the presentation. I want to go to my page 2 here, which is the thank you, but also letting you know how to get a hold of me. Hopefully, if I say something that really moves you, you can tweet it, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You certainly can reach out to me through email. I want today for you, and what every speaker wants, is for you to take something away here that makes you better as a library worker, something that hopefully inspires you to keep wanting to learn, to keep wanting to get better, so that you can better serve your community. So let's get started. I'm gonna give you a kind of an overview of what we're going to do today, right? This is about managerial leadership. And as I said, it's about leading from the middle. I believe that there needs to be a revolution about how we look at libraries and how we look at leading libraries, right? And to that point, today we're going to talk about the things that are kind of either holding us back or that we need to concentrate and focus on the idea of starting a revolution in libraries. So the first is we need to destroy the leadership myths around libraries. Then secondly, we need to explore the idea of authentic and emergent leadership that's there in our libraries today. And then we need to talk about how, especially now after COVID, we decide and we are able to create healthy leaders, which then lead to healthy organizations. So is it an evolution or a revolution? I've been out in 2015 to 2019. I was out speaking on the fact that we needed to make these changes in libraries because there was so much upheaval in the libraries in the decades that we were looking through. And I was looking at that and I said, look at all the current disruptors that are in our libraries, all the things that are happening. And this is pre-COVID, right? We were already starting to see all of these changes. Libraries and conferences, you would see time after time, we would talk about the changes that were happening in libraries and the fact that libraries needed to change for their communities and become different things than the traditional libraries that had been there, right? And we started to have these conversations, and then COVID hit, right? And there has been no bigger disruptor to what we are going to be seeing as we move forward in libraries than what the pandemic has brought to us. Now, what it has brought and what it really clearly put forward, it shined a light on all of the things that needed to be changed in the first place. All of the things that we see in our overall communities, whether it was social injustice, whether it was high levels of poverty, whether it was inequities in so many different areas, all of those things were there. What happened, though, was that COVID spotlighted it. Libraries were dealing with it, and we were starting to say, we need to change our libraries because we need to move away from being this transactional organization to a transformational organization so we can help transform our communities. But I think the revolution is on. And when you look at what a revolution is, it's just a fundamental change in the way that we think about something, right? It's just a change in our paradigm. But we have to start to evaluate what we do in libraries and how we're going to change. I think we have seen this. I was talking to someone yesterday who was another library director of a small library in Connecticut, and he was talking to me about the fact that how they were trying to figure out how they were going to move forward after COVID, because they had seen a number of their things that they did that people didn't have the need for as much anymore, right? And people weren't coming in as much because they were kind of afraid of coming in from the pandemic, and they weren't sure if they were going to still get the same number of people coming in and all of that. But I had talked to him about the things he was doing in the community. They were serving as a place where people could actually come in and get COVID kits. They were serving as a place where people could come in, and they were doing shot clinics in this library. And I said, people understand the relevance of your organization, right? I don't think they're going to go away because they use you in a different way, as long as you continue to decide that you have made that fundamental change in that paradigm of what you do for your community. So let's start to kind of work on that and break this down for you a little bit. Hopefully some of you had an opportunity to see me at the Wisconsin Library Association. And at the Wisconsin Library Association, I talked a great deal about this idea of puzzles and mysteries. And if I break it down for you a little bit here, the idea is that puzzles can be solved. They have answers, but mysteries are no comfort to us. And Tregerton's idea, which, this had been out for a number of years, this kind of concept. And where I saw it and where it kind of got some traction was when Malcolm Gladwell started talking about it. And he talked about the idea that our world used to be places of puzzles, right? Places that there would be issues or things that we'd face. They had answers, and we'd just be able to work through them. Some of the time they were puzzles because we didn't have all of the information, or we didn't have them put together in the right way. But if you figured it out, you could solve the puzzle. His concept now is the world is changing to the point that we have a lot more mysteries. These are things that are difficult to answer. Now, you see this in libraries. As I started to hear this, I started to really think about libraries, especially public libraries, because we see this every day, right? For those of you who are like me, who've been around in libraries, remember when people basically came into us for information or a book, we solved their puzzle very simply. We were able to give them a bit of information, and they were able to walk away satisfied in what we were able to provide them. Now, though, many people are coming into our buildings for things that are much more mysteries, things that are not solvable, right? We are providing lunches for children, or because they are hungry, right, in our libraries. We are serving as clinics in our libraries, right? We are working with social workers in our libraries. And these are around issues that are very difficult to solve, but our community is struggling with them. So the library has taken on the role of being much more involved in that. Well, all of these additional things that have been coming to our libraries have put a strain on the traditional way that libraries lead, right? The whole hierarchical way of there's, staff members, the managers, the director, and all of those things, just a list of things go up to the point where the director would answer all of the gray areas, the things that couldn't be solved. All the black and white areas of problems were being solved by other folks. Then the gray area would get to a group of, to the director or someone at that level, and they would solve these difficult mysteries for the organization. Well, there are so many of them now that they are overwhelming any organization. And therefore, more people in the organization need to be involved with the solving of these. More people in the organization have more access and more skills and abilities to help solve these. And that's why I think that we are, and the only way we really truly can move forward is by trying to make sure that more people have the ability to be a part of problem solving than just the director or the manager. We have to look to everyone in the organization, from our lowest staff member or page or whoever is at the level of doing the work of putting books on the shelf, all the way up to the director. Everyone deserves respect because they bring in a whole different set of skills and abilities, and we've got to be able to use those skills and abilities for them. So let's start talking about the area that I think is a beginning to that, and that's destroying the whole concept, these leadership myths that are out there about how we move forward. And after I bring this up, if anyone has any questions about what I have brought forward, I know we want to kind of break things up today, so I'm just not speaking at you. If we were in a general room, I'd be able to just kind of look at your faces and understand where there's something you may want to have better clarity on. So put something in the chat, put something in the question and answers. And after I get through part one, I'll ask if there were any questions that you want me to answer around destroying the leadership myths. So this is the best definition of leadership that I found in many years of looking through many textbooks on leadership and being through many leadership programs. It's by Peter Nordhaus. He's often cited as one of the great researchers on leadership. It is very simple. Leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Let's break that down, right? Leadership is a process. It involves influencing others. It happens in the context of a group, so you can't lead yourself. It involves reaching a goal. And finally, the goals that are reached are shared by both the leaders and the followers, right? It's a very simple definition, but one that's, when you look at it, it means that everybody involved in the leadership process have to be involved willingly to move forward for success to happen in leadership. Well, we know that's not necessarily the case, right? I think if we all have been invited to leadership seminars and things of that nature, and over the past 30 years, there's no shortage of leadership work being done. I mean, if you look up leadership books on Google, you get 84 million plus results. The leadership industry is a $50 billion industry. But as we have seen, and this is from The End of Leadership by Barbara Kellerman, there is no evidence that our leadership in the country since this point in time has improved in any way, right? And I think that as we look at DC and we look at some of our state houses and we look at some of our city halls, leadership is struggling to lead. And it's struggling because it is struggling to get everybody willingly to join in and believe in and want a willingness to follow. And it is based off of a very few number of people having the ability to make decisions that affect a number of people. So throughout the years, there have been all of these myths, right, about what is the perfect leader, right? And it's very difficult because some people think if I am not this, I can't be the perfect leader, right? This idea that great leaders are born, not made. Leadership can be attained through study alone. Great leaders do not fail. And then great leaders accrue power due to their position. All of these are myths that are, we have to get away from, especially in library world, right? Library organizations are some of the organizations in which the director has tremendous power, especially in smaller libraries, because many cases, the director may be one of a few staff members, if not the only staff member who is in the building, right? And therefore, their decisions have great sway with how the organization goes and how library services in that community are provided. So what we want to do is make sure that we examine this idea about what the perfect leader should be. And in the fact, the truth is that's the number one myth, that there is a perfect leader. So let's look at this great man theory that was posited in 1840 by Thomas Carlyle, right? We obviously know that it shouldn't be the great man theory anymore. It should be just the great person theory. But in that idea that this in 1840, that people were simply born into leadership. There were some people because of their heritage or whatever who were born to be leaders. But we have found studies show that there is no correlation between charisma and leadership. So I think a lot of times someone might look at someone who is very low key or shy and say, that person, just isn't much of a leader. Whereas we all know that there are people who are in our lives who are very low key, people who have led us, who are very shy and resigned, and yet they have been the best leaders in that we have had to lead us. One of the leaders that I think kind of instilled and made me want to become a leader was this 5-foot woman who basically was the most shy person you could ever imagine. But there was no one on the staff who wouldn't run through a wall for her. And that the reality of it was she was the best listener that I have ever had as a boss. And having that skill, she understood and she got to know everyone and what they needed to become the best employee. So leadership is based off of many things, just simply not charisma. And it also speaks to whether the leader can be extroverted or introverted. As I just was giving that example, just because someone is extroverted doesn't make them a better leader, right? I have lots of people who I've worked for who are very, very introverted people, but who can lead and step up to leadership very easily, and who have shown great skill at being leaders when someone needed to step up. So let's look at the other myths here shortly here, right? A Center for Leadership study, the Center for Leadership is out of Northwestern, also proved that leadership cannot be attained just by study alone, right? You've got to have more than just study to become a great leader. Many research articles have found that great leaders actually fail the most. They believe in leadership as a series of experiments, and those series of experiments they're willing to learn from and become better. And then lastly, studied by Adam Goodman, that leadership is not attained just through positional power, right? Leadership is attained by many other things, but positional power, just saying because I am the director, as I am here in Cleveland Public Library, that because I'm the director, I am the leader, would be a big stretch, because I need to be able to sell my staff on the things that matter to them and that they want to come along with me on. So what makes a good leader, right? Well, the research from the Center for Creative Leadership found that 10% of it only comes from coursework and training. Now, it doesn't mean that I say people shouldn't do coursework. Certainly, we want you at the 4W conference, and I think there's certainly things that you will take away from it here. But there are also other things that you can do that will push your leadership, right? So 20% comes from developmental relationships, right? Networking. And then 70%, and the most important thing, and this is something that I have really tried to use here, and the Cleveland Public Library is this idea of challenge assignments, right? What they have learned is putting people on the committees in which that committee is actually doing an important challenge for the organization, or putting an individual into a role in which they have a specific goal that they have to achieve, is the best way for people to become leaders, right? And so this is one of those areas that as we start to think about what are the ways that we push our folks to become leaders, this is the avenues to start them down. All right, so I've said a lot about leadership there. I want to make sure if there's any questions, any thoughts or whatever, or anything that's been put in the chat that people might have that will speak to what I've just brought to you about the myths of leadership. We can certainly take that and answer those things.
We don't have anything yet, but this is a good, oh, here we go. Could we hear that percentage breakdown again of
Sure, I'll
what
go back
yeah.
here.
Thank you.
So here's the percentage breakdown again. And this is for the Center for Creative Leadership at Northwestern. They took an examination of a number of leadership programs that were out there. And then they looked at it and they found that as far as effectiveness from the leader who was then surveyed, they found that the least effective way was coursework and training, right? Then 20% were that folks felt like that the networking they had done was effective, but overwhelmingly 7 out of 10 folks that they surveyed felt like the challenge assignments that have been given to them were the most effective in being for them to be able to kind of take that stretch and to kind of, you know, move on to become the best leader that they possibly could.
So related to that, we have a few questions about just talking a little bit more about challenge assignments and what you mean by that. And maybe that's something you're going to cover.
Yeah, no, I can speak to that right now. And this is clear. I happen to have working with me kind of doing the sound, and I didn't tell him I was going to talk about him in the program, but his name is Tristan Wheeler, and Tristan came to me like 4 years ago and said, I'm really into esports. I want to take on a bigger role around esports. And I said, all right, we don't have anyone doing this. I'm going to give you a challenge. I'm going to have you lead a committee around esports. You bring staff in, and then you guys start doing things around that, right? And so he has taken on the role of basically becoming the esports guru for the city of Cleveland itself, right? We're working with the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're challenging folks across the country and doing work on this. And he is taking it to the next level. It is taking on a role and then taking it and being the leader of it at a level where that wouldn't necessarily be what your role would be in the organization. I hope that makes sense. I mean, there are many examples of challenge assignments that people do. A lot of leadership programs now expect that the person who's going to come in is going to have a challenge assignment given to them by their library system if they're going to be a part of the library leadership program. It's really, really effective. I was a part of a leadership program by the Urban Library Council. And part of that, it was that I had to design a library when I was in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Clark County Library System that was going to reach out to a Hispanic community. And so I actually used an assignment that I was actually given for the organization to then take as a leadership challenge and learn some of the leadership skills that come from coursework and training, and then kind of integrate them into a challenge assignment. And it was truly very effective in my leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. I think those examples helped. We did get one other comment, and maybe I'm just going to read it, and if you want to comment on that comment, and that is, having a poor manager can actually cause staff to spend energy in unhelpful ways to them and their organization.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I think managerial leadership and successful leaders are so important to the overall health of the organization, right? And I say this, and you know, actually, it's kind of rolls into the next level of our discussion today. And for some reason, I'm not being able to move it. All right. Right. So it is so important to what we're trying to do, because when you have someone who's in the organization, who's in the middle, they hear from the director, you know, in a larger library like mine or whatever, they hear from the director. The director passes on the information of what we want to do for an organization in the middle, and the middle is responsible for passing that back down to the other staff members. Now, if you're a good middle manager, the idea is also you hear from the staff members the things that are important to them and the things that are important to the community, and then you take that information and then pass it back on to administration, so administration can then make some changes. If you do not do that, right, then what happens is that you have this breakdown. What the staff hears from the administration becomes warped because they're getting a message from a middle manager that may not be what the administration says. And what the administration gets is warped because they're not hearing back from the community and from the staff what are the changes that need to be made to the directives that have been put out. So the middle is so important in that. And so when you talk about the importance of managers, you can't underestimate those who don't lead for the right reason, right? And so once again, you know, I've had the opportunity to study under Adam Goodman, and so you'll see a lot about Adam Goodman here. Goodman here is a professor at Northwestern, and so he says this: why we lead serves as the foundation for how we lead. And that's really, really important in this democratization of leadership. If we are able to take some of the power away from those who are at my level, the director's level, as managers level, and pass it on to others within the organization, we've got to be able to understand and believe that those who are going to be given this right are leading for the right reason, are there for the right reason, right? Too many of the folks, managers and others, are taking the jobs simply because they want to make more money or they want to have more power, right? And if that is the reason for you to lead, that is a foundation for a disaster for the organization, for the library, for the community, right? And so why we lead serves as our foundation for how we lead. So before we get into to authentic leadership, I've already used Tristan as an example right here, but he's the classic example of it. I was going to use his story there and talking about what authentic leadership is, right? This is the idea that when you have a talent like Tristan had, right? Esports, if we invest in it, it creates a strength for the organization. So our job as leaders in any organization is to make sure that others are able to move up and that we're able to enable the excellence of others, right? But we can't enable the excellence of each other's if we don't know what drives them, what gives them strength, what makes them want to come to work every day. What leads them to want to lead because it is something that they care so deeply about, right? So I'm gonna ask you guys to do an exercise. I'm gonna ask you to take some time. Hopefully you're in a place where you have a pen and paper by your side. You can write something down. You can do this because I think this is important. And hopefully this is an exercise you'll find. If you are in some form of management position, this is something that you can go to some of your staff members and ask them. This is called the gifts exercise. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll start writing down what you see as gifts of the head, right? These are things that you have special knowledge of, right? So you might have special knowledge of a certain type of history. You might have a special knowledge about like knitting. You might have a special knowledge about art, write down these type of things. What we're looking for, again, is for you, the things that are something that you have that are specific to your knowledge base, right? What are your gifts of the head? And I'll give you just a minute here to write that down. All right, hopefully you can always come back to this if you weren't able to kind of work through what that gift is. And if you need more examples of it, put it in the chat and I'll give you some more examples. Now let's move to gifts of the heart. What are your passions? What are the things that really matter to you, like climate change or social justice? I can't remember if it was Wisconsin or not, or another city that I was at. One woman, her passion was squirrel rescue. And I'm not kidding. She had pictures. She bought up her phone and she showed me pictures of her. They put a little cast on squirrels who broke their legs and things, but it was her passion. And she took it, and then she was able, and after we had to talk, she went back to her library and said, I want to incorporate my squirrel rescue, into what I do at the library, right? So what are your passions? What are the things that drive you, that you really feel passionate about? I'll give you a minute to start thinking about it and write it down. All righty. So once again, and these can overlap in some things, because sometimes even gifts of the hands could be also gifts of the heart. So gifts of the hands are practical things that we do on a day-to-day basis, but things that are kind of things that we really are really good at. So some folks are really good at gardening. Some folks are really good at cooking. Right? If we were doing this live, I would be juggling right now, showing you my gift of the hand, of the ability to play, to juggle. Some people are musicians, right? And they can play instruments, right? But that doesn't mean that the gifts of the hand, playing music, might not be a gift of the heart for you as well. So write down your practical skills, things. Just think a little bit about yourself. What are the things that you really feel like you're gifted at? And go back and knock out some of these others if you couldn't think of some of the things that people, just think about things that people are like, I didn't know that about you, or you haven't shared with the rest of your staff members that you are really good at. All righty. So the importance of this and the authenticity exercise, and for you to see it from the standpoint of what it means to be an authentic leader, Authentic leaders lead from who they are, right? And sometimes though, as we're looking for those folks in our organization to step up and take on roles, especially take on roles of challenge assignments, they really want a challenge assignment about things that they're passionate about. You know, as I was talking to you about Tristan here, Tristan now is a member of ALA, and he's talking to me about going to ALA because, he is seen as an expert across the country around esports, right? But if he hadn't have brought that to me and I hadn't found out he had this esport kind of really gift, and it was a passion for him, and it was a passion that he felt like he could work with young kids and give them and bring them into the library for something other than what they thought would be, oh, the library is just books and whatever, and then just be able to bring them in. We need to do that with all of our staff members because it increases the authenticity of their leadership, of their want to be a leader within the organization, of their belief of getting up every morning and coming to the library passionate about something that they're going to lead and that they feel very strongly about. All right, so, if you have any questions around that, we're going to take a little break after this next couple of slides, and then we can talk about authenticity and emergent leadership here. So emergent leadership is a little bit different than authentic leadership. Authentic leadership is leading from who you are. Emergent leadership is for folks who are in different areas of the organization who emerge into leadership, right? These are folks who are continuously learning. They navigate moving in and out of leadership roles. They see the big picture. They're good at collaborating, and then they maintain their humility. And let me give you a perfect example. So when I was in Las Vegas, I was the regional director. So I had about 10 libraries I was responsible for. And one of the circulation managers calls me at home late night, and she says, did you hear about the fire today? And I was like, what? I didn't hear, no one talked to me about a fire. She said, well, it wasn't really a fire. It was kind of just an electrical thing. The fire department did come out, right? The manager kind of had a problem, as it was happening and the alarm went off, and she kept on looking for her kind of notebook that had all the information on how to deal with the fire, and she couldn't find it. So she was running around, and luckily though, Jeremy got us all together, took us out to where we're supposed to go and get to the tree that we're all supposed to stand on, and we're all ready. But she was still inside when the fire department got out. She still looked for the notebook and everything. And I just thought she wanted to know. And I said, well, hold on. You're meaning Jeremy the page? She said, yeah, Jeremy. I said, Jeremy the page led you guys out of this fire while the manager was still inside, right? And she said, yeah. I just thought you should know, click. And so I was left with having to go out and kind of deal with the situation. So the next day I go out and I have a conversation with the manager, right? But I start with Jeremy first. I go and I say, thank you, Jeremy. People have told me what you did. And then he goes, well, I mean, it really wasn't nothing. The notebook is always sitting out there and there, and I'm on my break. I have nothing to do. So I just found out what we need to do is nothing much, gather everybody together, take everybody outside, go to the tree. It's not a very hard thing. And I said, well, yeah, it's not very hard, Jeremy, but you showed that you were willing to lead when everybody didn't fully understand what they were going to do, right? So I went to the manager and I said, why didn't you call me? And the manager said, well, I was just embarrassed that what happened, right? It was just, I couldn't find the book and I was looking all around. And I said, but did you thank Jeremy? And she said, no. And I was like, I couldn't, I was like, she said, I'm sorry, I'm just embarrassed by this and whatever. But it goes to the point of, in every situation, someone needs to emerge and be the leader. But Jeremy went back to just being the page after that. He didn't say, oh, like, now I'm big, Jeremy, I've done this, I've proved this. He went back and became the page. Now, Jeremy went on and become a library director in another city, right? Because Jeremy understood that his leadership, that he had the components of it. He learned, he took the time to know what to do if a fire were to happen. He moved in and out of the leadership role. He was willing to move back. He was humble about it, right? And we all have people who do these same things in our organization. But how we deal with that, do we thank them when they step up, even if it might embarrass us, right? Do we then start to do the work of developing this person who has emerged and shows the skills to be a great leader, right? And which is what I did. I started working with Jeremy to show, to talk to him about the fact of what he does and how he can continue to emerge as leaders, and gave him different challenge opportunities along the way. So we've moved past part 2. I want to make sure that I'm thinking about time, but if anyone had any questions around part 2, I'd be happy to take any questions around authentic and emergent leadership, because that's where we can take our middle managers and the folks who are below management level and start to develop them into the leaders they can be, and really democratize leadership.
I don't see any questions there yet. So if you have some, please go ahead and enter them.
And we can always wait and take any questions toward the end here.
That sounds good.
I know I've got to think about, I know you wanted to make sure I had at least 15 minutes for questions, and I still probably have about 10 more minutes I want to go through on this final step, which is creating healthy organization and healthy leaders. So let's move on through that, and then I'll take any questions you have at the end. So 20 years ago, as a library director who was, actually I wasn't a library director, as a librarian at the point in time where I was, the movement of change in library was so frustrating. And one of my friends looked at me, he's now the university librarian at Syracuse. So we're now in this, on the opposite side of it, but he said, we're moving this profession ahead one funeral at a time, right? And, it was of course a joke, but there is a reality that change was so slow in our organizations. But what I've come to learn is that slowness isn't because of age. That wasn't simply the case. It's because of thought. As I go and I speak at library schools across the country, and I talk to new library librarians to be, they still have a lot of the mindset of the librarians who were coming into library school in the 1970s. Why are you going to library school? Well, because I like to read. Why are you going to library school? Because people think I'm quiet and that the library school is the best place for me to be, right? Counselors are sending them and telling them they need to go to library school because they have a personality of a librarian, right? But that's not what we need in libraries any longer. We need very, very different people to help us in moving what communities are struggling with all across the country. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea. It's called organizational citizenship behavior. Me and Rachel Rubin, who is now in a collective, used to speak to this all the time. And this is something that Rachel really strongly believed in, and I do as well. The idea that we can create the organizations that we want, right? Because individual behavior is discretionary, but we can create formal rewards for what aren't formal rewards and get the same type of behavior within our organization by just putting down what's the behavior that our community and for us, the library wants to have, right? I think what we want our libraries to see is a vision, is a set of values that we live in and that we want to have in our organization. And if you guys have something simple that you can put in the chat, like values that you use in your organization, or a statement that you use that you want your staff or staff is told or believes in and that they exude every day in their libraries, please share it with us. I think it's really important for us to see. I have a couple of examples here that we'll talk about. So it's really built around 6 pieces of it. Altruism, meaning, everybody voluntarily helps a colleague. Compliance, adhering to the spirit as well as the letter of the law. Sportsmanship, tolerating trivial inconveniences without complaint. Example, someone puts purple copy paper in the copier and you accidentally print out, your stuff on purple. You don't get upset about it. You just kind of run along with it and say, oh, well, purple's good for today. Consulting with others before taking action. Keeping up with matters that affect the organization, and then promoting the organizations to the outsiders. I think you cannot get beyond number 6. I always find it hard, and when I go to other library systems and talk whatever, the challenge of library staff members who will put down the library that they work for, right? I agree that there shouldn't be this all-in like mindset or kind of the sense of everybody has to be a zombie and say things the same way, right? And criticism is important always to us getting better as organizations. But you'll talk to some staff members and you're like, why would you work in a place that makes you so unhappy, right? What is this? So organizational loyalty and really promoting the organization means that you actually love what you do, right? And I think a lot of us know people who we work beside that sometimes you're like, why are you working here, right? Is this really what you want to do? So when we are looking for creating this organizational behavior, right, this cultural behavior, we're really looking around making sure that we have people who believe in it. So I have a very simple one. This is from, I was out speaking to Tulsa City's and County Library System. And they had one that I just thought was so clear, so really easy to think. They talk to their staff always about being authentic, being intentional, being transparent, and being creative, right? It's just the 4 B's, right? And they talk about it all the time. And it's their organizational culture, right? Everybody walks around and when they have a problem, they'll like say it, are we being authentic in this? Are we being transparent? Like when, and the staff will challenge leadership around this, right? You say you're transparent. Are you being transparent? It's our culture. Our culture has to be this, and you have to follow those things. So what OCB does is if you get people to buy into this culture, right? It reduces the staff turnover. It increases staff managerial productivity. Customer service is better. It reduces costs of turnover. And it encourages innovation and taking initiative. And if people believe in the organization, then like Tristan, they're willing to come up to the director and say, look, this is something we should be doing, right? Because I believe in this organization. I want this organization to be better, right? And it encourages them to take initiative. So how do we do OCB in our organizations, right? I say to folks, you really have to rethink hiring. I mean, in libraries, we have hired the same way in many different ways. And a lot of that is legacy hiring. I don't know how many times I go into a library and I will look at all the employees and they look very similar, right? And certainly the mindset is the same, right? Whoever's the manager there likes to hire people who are like them because it's easy. It's an easy fit, right? And so if you have folks, you have a manager who's very quiet and reserved, and they hire a lot of other very quiet and reserved people, you're going to have a library that isn't there to select and serve all of the community. And certainly when it comes to diversity and inclusion, right? If we're not looking for every pro-social person that we can, everybody who is who's open and wants to change communities and wants to be a part of serving folks, right? I think it's, and if anybody wants to share something in the chat, it's always this idea of how do we have people who really don't like people working in libraries, right? It's crazy, But I mean, there is some reality to the fact that there are a lot of folks who work in libraries who don't really like being around people. I was at a library school recently, and I was, just giving a presentation to them, and there was about 30 students in there. And I asked them, "Oh, what do you guys want to do after you graduate?" About it, I'm not kidding you, 20 people wanted to be archivists. And I was like, the likelihood of you getting an archivist job is almost nil, right? But they have been put into this kind of mindset that they're going to get at work in a job where they don't work around people. They only work with books, they only archive these things, or they work in special collections, but they don't have to work with people. But that's not the life of a public librarian or an academic librarian as well. We all have folks that we have to work with, and the better we are at working with them, the better we are at serving our community. So I'm going in with 3 things here. 3 tips. I always get asked from folks, and I know I'm running my time, so I'll be quick. I get asked from folks, like, what are 3 things that they can do to become better leaders, right? The first is, I recommend this book, Power of Full Engagement. And the Power of Full Engagement talks about the fact that in many things in our life, right, we conserve energy without even knowing it. How many times have you driven to work and you're like, I don't even remember driving, or like you brush your teeth and you're like, did I brush my teeth or whatever? Many times our bodies put ourselves on autopilot so that we conserve energy. And the idea of this book is for folks that in life, there are things that we do to conserve energy, right? And we should be looking at energy consumption as far as time. Everybody wants to say, how do I be a better time conserver? No, this is about how do I better conserve energy and be able to use the amount of energy I need. So it's a great book for you to look at. If you are like struggling with like a bunch of things on your plate and you're like, if I were to become a leader, I have so many more things on my plate, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. But this book has been really helpful for me, and I think it could be very helpful for you. Second, eat that frog, right? People are always like, I don't know, I'm struggling. I come home all the time. I'm really tired. I'm cranky. I've gone through a whole really bad day. And then I take it out on my family when I get home or whatever, da, 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 da. And so there's a book by Brian Tracy called Eat That Frog. I use this constantly. The idea is from a quote by Mark Twain. If the first thing you do in the morning is eat a live frog, it'll probably be the worst thing you ever do that day, right? And so if you come in, if you have something horrible that you need to do, like fire somebody, do it early in the morning. Eventually things will shape up better, and then you will go home, and many of those things that have been on your plate, that have been on your shoulders, will have been gone by then, and you can go and spend the time that you need to spend with your family. I have a 30-minute commute on my way home. I take the 30 minutes to think about all the things I need to do the next day. I send that through to my folks, and I put it in, and I get that on my calendar for the first thing in the morning. And then I just go and I enjoy my family. Right. And so for those who worry about the fact that can I enjoy my family and be a leader and take all the pressure that comes along with that, this is a great book for you to read as well. And finally, this is a quote from a former president of MIT. The key to success is resilience. The keys to being resilient are options. So you really need to kind of think about if you're going to practice resilience, how do I create more options in my life so that I can be resilient as I move forward? With that, I'm going to leave you with the final quote from my boss. One of my bosses, he always likes to say, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a decoy. So no matter what, as many things that you try to do in reality, leaders, it always ends up, there's always some challenge that you could never expect. I wish you all of the best of luck. I hope I have said something that you can really take from this and move on with and kind of work with. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Great, that's perfect. We do have a few questions. One of the staff members is a stronger person than the director and really wants to be the leader. Do you have any thoughts about?
So I think there is this question always of positional power. and how does someone work with it. And so ultimately, it only works if the two understand what they're trying to get to, right? If the director and the staff member recognize that they want to find a way to create the best library system they can be, and that the person who's under the director has a set of skills that are really important for the organization and can be helpful, they need to have that conversation about how can you take on more responsibility with this, so that and especially it goes to that, once again, what is your gift that you're really passionate about that you want to take on? And I'm willing to give up that power around that so that you can be successful and that the organization can be successful, right? But there is going to always be that positional power. And if there's positional power there, they both have to understand that that's not going to change.
Great, thank you. We had another question, or someone who was just a little concerned and wondering if you have any thoughts about managing, maybe if you're hiring with the qualities that you talked about in mind, how do you avoid just hiring extroverts?
Yeah, no,
How
I
do
think
you avoid that tendency? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you avoid that tendency by looking at what are the things that this person can bring to the organization that are really, really important. So you certainly want to look for someone who can bring it out in a, in an interview. But you're also looking for what are the skills and abilities that they have that they show on paper in their resume or things of that nature that you can bring up in the interview that might make them shine, that might make them come out of their shell and talk about something that's really going to be that's important for you as an organization and that you can see that's important for them, right? There's an important thing about introverts and extroverts that I learned or whatever, is that introverts can move through the spectrum to become extroverts for a period of time. But after that, they need time to kind of recharge their energy so that they can go back and come back in and work in under that. So what it means is sometimes we'll have folks who come in and very extroverted, but they're very introverted people, right? But we've got to be able to recognize them and give people the ability to recharge their batteries when they do go and do that extra effort to be that extrovert.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and one more. Do you have any thoughts or strategies around developing shared goals so that all leadership efforts, projects, and initiatives are kind of moving in the same direction and that there's shared investment in the work?
That's huge. I mean, I think
in 1 minute or less.
Yeah, I think just a 1 minute, there is nothing more important than, the organization working together to design what's the strategic goals for the organization. And you've got to really be able to listen and hear from the staff members about what matters to them and how they want to effectively be a part of, changing the right? Because ultimately what we're trying to do, we serve a community we're very fortunate who is giving us funds so that we can work in a place and make themselves better, right? And so we need to understand from the staff who are most connected to them what they want, and we need to hear them and understand what they are passionate about and what they want to work on, because it makes for a better goal setting.
Thank you. And I'm just looking at the time here. We do have a couple minutes here. So right. I'll ask you another question. We have some great questions here. So how can we encourage, as middle manager, our higher up managers to move beyond just talking the talk and make those "we're here for you" sentiments feel more genuine for our staff?
So I think one of the things that we've done here is pushed our middle managers to have very honest conversations with folks who are, who they are supervising about what's going on. And I'll give you an example. Well, actually, let me do this challenge because this is the challenge that had happened to me. And I'll say, everybody has to accept and say, you could be doing more. And I had to take that. I went to every one of our buildings and had one-on-ones with all of our staff members and said, tell me what you want me to answer, and I will answer it as honestly as I can, right? And I said that because I knew that there were questions that still wanted to be answered, but somewhere down the line, in the midst, it had been warped or hadn't got to me in the way they wanted to ask me, and they were able to ask me directly. And I think what you want to do is push the leadership to really come in and have honest conversations with folks and answer them the questions honestly.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was incredible. And you finished at exactly 11:30 with answering that question. So thank you so much for getting lots of really wonderful comments and appreciation from folks. I just want to remind people that our next session is at 1 o'clock. And we'll be hearing from Michelle Stricker from the New Jersey State Library about disaster response. We hope to see you there or at one of the other sessions, but if not, I hope you have a good rest of your day. And another quick reminder that the recording of this will be available by next week. So you can look for that as well if you want to share it. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.